There he is, and he doesn't know why he's putting in this earpiece because he's by himself today. Thank you, producer. But I already know you're there in the chat. What's up, CIA scribed slash thoth? Let me get my chat pulled up, and we'll get going. I've got a little thought experiment. We'll start with here. Instead of I don't have the cool music to play. I've got to shut my phone off. Walk around listening to music before I get going here. And I've got to shut it off every time. I'm right there, dancing around like you can see me do on The Shaman and the Philosopher, because Ricardo writes us all these cool songs. But I'm doing that on my own, but then I got to press pause. Otherwise, it's like copyright and stuff, because people don't like you sharing their music. I mean, I would think, having my endorsement as your song being a cool song to fucking shake it to before you do a show is, I think you'd want that, I might be biased, but I think that'd be a good review to have. But they don't see it that way. How do they even make their money on music anymore? Like, for real. I mean, I know. Hey, what's up, Ulf? Thank you for joining. We're just filling a minute or two here, and then we're going to get going on Giants. I mean, I know, Apple Music gets my whatever, $9 a month, and then I get any song ever, like as soon as they come out. So it's just, what are you mad about if I play your song? There's actually, I have found a couple of bands that I listen to inadvertently, like Dr. Dog is one that if you use their stuff on YouTube, YouTube will just send you a little notification, like usual, like, this would be a copyright, but this artist allows you to share it on YouTube. So, but you got to find those accidentally. So I guess I could start warming up with Dr. Dog music here. That might be allowed. All right, everybody. Welcome. Thanks for joining. We're gonna continue what we started in 32, which was a dive into giants, and we're gonna do that because not only today did I get a moment to watch Dan Richards' video on giants, which I mentioned last time, which was well done. He's got the background where it's all outdoors, and that definitely works for us bearded lot. Anyhow, I've also, because last episode 32, we touched on the work of Jem Vieira. Well, I've been invited to what's the verb? Interview or sit in on a chat with Jem Vieira tomorrow morning. It'll be recorded, so it won't be out for a while yet. But of course, so I went back and finished that article that we all started together, and it was very well done. Again, on the focusing on sort of the polydactyl, the 6 finger toes, or really more than the should be amount. What's going on, Sarah? Let's welcome everybody. What's up, Wolf? Thank you there. Described. I know, but I just remembered the Dr. Dog, would let me play their stuff, and I don't like to bother y'all because I know you are good at it, and I know there's gonna come. Should I have lighting? And maybe I should. I don't know. Whoa, that hurts. Does it? Come on. You're gonna adjust, aren't you? There. That's still bad. No. Well, adjusted there. All right, let's not get skewed up. And welcome, Sarah. There we go. It's taking. I don't know. We'll fuck with it. Wherever we were as we were filling our first 5 minutes or so here. Talking to Jem Vieira tomorrow. So that again further sort of looped in my checking out other people's work on giants. And so it made sense, of course, for us to sort of full circle what we started last week. Go ahead and wrap up here a little bit anyway, and talk more. That's not even going to work. About my sort of. There we go. There's color. Hi. Now you can see me. I'll turn that out because we're going to start reading a little bit here in a minute. But just to expound a little bit more on sort of what it is, what do we mean by giant, right? And we're going to get into that with the Tuscaloosa. And you're talking about, human beings that if you walked around today, sure, they'd stand out, but you wouldn't go, oh, that's impossible, you know. That was a point made by Dan in his video that I watched earlier today. Amy, what's going on? Good to see you as well, whether you're listening or watching. There won't be a lot of visual tonight, and I better get to lighting this candle, excuse me, y'all, because I mentioned at the beginning that I had something to say about fire, and I did. I had a cool thought, and we'll just sort of begin with that once we get our fire lit. This pays off a lot more as soon as I turn these lights out, I promise. Boy, that one is really bright, isn't it? If you don't stay back, it's like, yeah. All right, so we're going to talk about fire for a second. Often comes to mind, my personal experience with fire, guys, is when all of this transition madness one could call a shamanic calling began, I picked up a habit which was what one would call a daily meditation, prayer, all these words would apply, practice, meeting, if you're from the AA vernacular, with myself, and God as I understood him, right? And the fire became a symbolic meeting place. And spending a lot of time by fire, you learn, you just start having a lot of experiences with the fire. And you watch the fire and you have thoughts about the fire and the role that the fire would have played in human history, right? For most all of it, as we can imagine it. Right? Until very recently, the world has sort of isolated itself from fire, and fire becomes sort of a event, go to the bonfire, oh, there's a cabin with a wood fireplace, it becomes this thing, this event, rather than this sort of central focus, daily life of human beings for all the things it provides. But spending dedicated time every day by one naturally then begins, I think, to have a better grasp, perhaps, of what the human mind would have had about fire when it lived with it daily, right? And there are a lot of things to it. Just as far as, people go all the way as to the effects it has just on your sight that are positive, let alone the effects it might have on, third eye and all the other things that everyone may or may not agree with, right? But what it damn sure does is opens up sort of the conductive material between you and your ancestry and your history here upon this planet, right? I mean, fire's not possible outside the fucking atmosphere. Right? Space can't, fire is specific to here, right? And thoughts I used to have on fire sitting by it was, when I found myself making fires all the time, you needed firewood, right? You need a lot of firewood. And so that was sort of some of the impetus to first really getting out and exploring woods, because you, of course, wanted your fat wood stumps, but you needed fuel, for the actual fire. And I was always avoiding, cutting down anything, right? Why not take the plenty that lay around you when you're in an old, growth forest? And so when you're burning that, you start to have these thoughts, right, about all of this matter that, because you have been collecting, right, and you have been tending and breaking it down into sticks and twigs, right? Because, when you're building a fire, you got to have the little sticks and twigs, right, to get the slowly work up your coal bed, because then you do have much bigger pieces that you want to be able to consume as well. And even in the gathering of that wood and the breaking of sticks and twigs, I was developing I've seen correlations of how, life is like this, right? There's this foundational step that's, yes, tedious, right? And doesn't seem necessary if you're just kind of looking at it objectively. But once you have the experience, you understand, well, this is pretty fucking crucial right here. If I have a bunch of sticks and twigs piled up and I've got my fat wood piled up and then I got the big logs, this shit's going to go a lot smoother, gasoline or no. It's just that sort of simple. Now, me letting myself sort of go on there to you about thoughts I had about fire, but I'll finish when I started. So I'm there and you're watching all this burn, right? And you start to go, wow, that's a lot of mass. That's a lot of mass that's being converted, yes, to energy. That much for sure, but there's also something else, happening. You're seeing a whole lot of, mass of stuff suddenly gone. It was there and it's gone. And you watch that over time and you start to go, well, what does this mean? What process would this play to, and now you're starting to think of, creators, right? What role would this play if this place is canvas, and there's matter, energy is matter and it's stuck, just in some dead wood in the forest. What sort of helpful hand is all of that to the ecosystem and all of these thoughts, okay? Now, that's just me forcing out the little bit of time, I could, but I did it diligently, like every day for years. One starts to see that there's a whole lot of not only value in a fire, but things that are intrinsic to a human being. Cooking food over a fire is just a different experience, and you do it a few times, and it seems to just awaken something within you. And anybody that spends time around fire knows precisely what I mean, right? And it's like this glimpse in what role fire would have played. Now we can start thinking more specifically about these like Native Americans, right? That we look at so much here for good reason. What role fire might have played, right? Was there perhaps in the smaller towns or villages or particular family, outposts as a fire keeper, right? How valuable is that role? Especially, when you're not in some big industrialized place where naturally there's sort of a process behind keeping like some fires going. How central is that dude, right? Make sure it never goes out, right? We gotta travel, okay, we get a bundle of coals, How many then traditions sort of latch on to that, spiritual and all of that, and then what does that role become? You see, now we've spent almost 10 minutes sort of going on about what fire could be and what one gains from just a little time by it. Well, the thought I was having was opposed to that, was when you look at this modernity that we all live in. I was watching it earlier. Sometimes when, you just need to like fucking vacate and look at something, that is just blind content. Well, James May will pop up in my YouTube feed, and he's doing this deal with his granddaughter where he just travels around different places in America. It's, cool. Seen some British dude that's funny his take, right? We went to a Tesla diner, and it's all modern and clean. And, so it's just got my thoughts like seeing the robots, right? Thinking, playing this trajectory towards modernity out, right? And where does that go? And where does that leave fire, right? Where does that leave fire when everything's like electric and clean? Why is it in all like futuristic shows? I mean, there's never fire unless it's like a disaster, You think of like the alien, whatever you think of alien technology and what we'd call alien lore, right? Because nobody's got video, you know what I'm saying? So we'll call it lore, no matter if you believe it's real or not. But what are, these surviving reports of, what does it all paint a picture of? We don't see them tending a fire, do we? It's all very sterile and clean and like uber cerebral, Quest for fire. Thank you, Amy. Frequency transfer, indeed, right? So, let's take this little picture of what fire is to this place, this earth, within this atmosphere is, right? Okay. And then this trajectory towards modernity and what it does to fire, which we've already demonstrated is pretty intrinsic to the human experience and to earth, to life here. Right? Okay. Imagine then, if these reports, whatever you think, if you want to imagine that the universe is so massive, right? So your brain can't even, it's just that big, you know, that, okay, there are other things out there, there are other life forms. And then you want to take on board, are they aliens? Are they like the reports we get back, right? Like, what if they've all just sort of seen what we see humans want to do? Just take this fucking bend towards indoors, AC, clean, nature, dirty, bad, you know. Brain, good, you know, go that way. Robots, you know. What if, like, that's a trajectory that is, like, then common upon potential scattered planets with life forms? So what if, like, the firekeeper, right, and the tending of fire and the role of fire is also, as we've seen here on Earth, like, under threat universally, right? I mean, just doing our best with a thought experiment here at the beginning of the show, right? Freely labeled, though I forgot to play the disclaimer. But if as above, so below, as within, so without, if it's all like, if it is there, then it does tend to play out like here, okay, then this would be the case, yeah? In these early native societies, that role of fire, which was so sacred, right, which for not reasons we could suppose spiritually, for all the things I said I learned sitting by a fire, I would think they experienced as well, you know, and just much more so, and over lifetimes and lifetimes, right? But because of its necessity for food prep and for, you know, warmth in the cold times and all the things that a fire provided outside of these potentially, you know, ceremonial, it would have been a sacred thing, right? In both those levels. Whereas by that time in the West, and with DeSoto and them, fire was much more as destructive. There was explosions already, and harquebuses and cannons, and, you know, just the birth of that sort of industrial type machinery where fire was harnessed and, you know, right? Not sacred. Wouldn't then, let's jump now back to a mind of a creator of a place such as this universe, wouldn't you think then that to that creator, protecting a planet of firekeepers might be important? It seems to me it might be. Again, I do have all this experience by a fire, but if you can just play back. Just how long have humans been here? 300,000, Neanderthals, a million, right? All this time where fire to this species was integral, daily, year after year. Maybe that would be a special thing, you know. I know I'm generally always railing against modernity, and I don't mean to sound that way. It has many wonderful things about it. Well, not many, but it's got some wonderful things about it. But that one just came to me, you know, today, and I wanted to share it here as we warmed up, getting ready to talk about giants. And since I didn't have music to play, I thought I'd share my thought on fire. And you know, another reason you always see me lighting these candles is just that is how those experiences I had of opening up and latching on to how important that is to just being human. And I don't mean just in the biologic ways, survival and shit, But imagine instead of a TV every evening, you were sitting around a fire listening to some stories, right? And yeah, a lot of the stories you pay attention to and the shadows and it all plays a part, right? But a lot of times you're just tuning out and staring into that fire and you're watching the little flames and you're looking on the blue and the green and what's the difference? And, your imagination is roaring. It makes for a much different human being versus what we would recognize today. See, I can go a long way with fire. I could keep going, but I won't because we have a announced title of giants and people here looking. You didn't fail anything, bro. And if you're still wanting to hop in. What you talking about? You got you know how to get in this studio, I do believe. Yes, excellent point. Watching a more visible and active sky above. I hate to say I'm unfortunate. I mean, at least I live in an area where at least I can see the major bodies every night. I'm like 20 miles from major city light pollution, but still plenty around, right? So I don't get even a glimpse of what would have been standard practice every single night. And not every single night for a lifetime, every single night for thousands and thousands and thousands of years. Yes, Ricardo has joined us. Give us an update, or I should probably check my messages. But now we're actually going to look at a little bit of the DeSoto Chronicles, and where they talk about and describe Tuscaloosa, because I want to. I mentioned I'm going to sit in on an interview with Jim Vieira tomorrow, whose work, as it turns out, is largely centered on giants around the world, which was very fortuitous and excellent to opportunity. I'm grateful for there, Dave. But now I'm going to get ready to turn out our hello lights. Let me check my messages, and. Yeah. No worries, bro. I know what's going on. You do your thing, and you know how to get in if you want to get in. Right. Okay. Other than that, welcome. We're gonna read for a minute, and we're gonna talk about, well, maybe everybody doesn't know. I don't know how long people have been watching me. That's another thing that I've got to address probably moving forward after we're at episode 33 here, is trying to get sort of some concise pictures of really everything that I found. But amongst the horde are the crescent-shaped mound, is one way to describe it, or the mound modeled precisely on a 85 million year old impact crater about 10 or 11 miles away is an even more precise way to say it, and also memorialized with a fired clay piece with, again, a representation, exact map of that mound that was found in the creek eroding said mound. Right. Well, this and many other factors, the location to Mobilla, the marker tree, and spiritual intel, which I know a lot of you are going to go to that, and it's fine. You can. I have no argument for you, other than I found everything with spiritual intel, so I'm going to keep fucking trusting it. And if you got money involved or your soul, you might want to also, because, it's paying off in personal development, which could only ever be the goal of all of this. But it seems to me that said mound is the site of, I'll just say, Tuscaloosa's son. And we'll flesh out those facts, namely being because we know he died at the battle, which took place at the site of this mound. All of you can see my work with all the correlating reasons, that lead me to say that quite confidently. Now, I may be wrong because I haven't dug, I don't have ground penetrating radar, right? So, there is that disclaimer, right? But when you couple in the facts of it being mimicked on this impact crater, and watch my work on it, but you let your mind play out to what all that meant about going to this effort to mimic that, obviously after the Battle of Mobila, when we know from these chronicles everybody was fucking wiped out, right? 20, 30 miles around, burned and killed, So you think of that whatever was left of the society at that point coming together. Well, this is not a major thing, right? Meaning it's not like a fucking Cahokia mound. You've seen the size, you've seen the videos. It's whatever, 15 feet down to center, and it slopes all the way back, I don't know, 40, 50, right? And all the way around, fucking, I don't know, 70, 80 across, something like that, right? It's big, but a group of people well experienced in doing this, or at least with knowledge of how, it's not a big deal. But still, the devastation that occurred here, it takes on a different hue, because you realize what that would have meant, taking this completely dead. They burned all the towns, man. They fucking killed everybody. They didn't want to ask questions. They wanted 30 days of no attacks after the Battle of Mobila, right? The wherewithal it would take to assemble the people in that situation to make a memorial such as this, what that not only says about the importance of that impact crater, whatever they recognized it as, but that land feature and that river, the Coosa, it says how important that was to them for sure. But it also says that whoever's buried there, as I think there's a reason this clay model of it is shaped like a sarcophagus. I mean, that whoever is buried there would have been pretty important as well. And since Tuscaloosa's survived and made north, never to enter the pages of history as we know it again, you arrive at, okay, that would have been Chief's son, who is also, in the bit we're about to read, you'll see, is described as the same size he is. So that is my personal interest in, we use the word giant, but let's be honest, at 7.5 feet, all right, I'm almost 6.5. I've met dudes that are almost 7. I've met dudes that are a little taller, right? But at 7 feet, 7.5 feet, is that something that we would describe as impossible? No. So why does archaeology, right? I don't know. Obviously we all know what they wouldn't want known is that there's a large variant of hominids in pretty, when you consider proportions, large proportions for the amount of dead we found from this culture. And that could be problematic for many people with many narratives, that they want pushed, that if they're not concerned for just truth, So we don't have to dwell on that, but that's why so much of this gets tossed the way it does. So I'm going to swing over to this new tab, and I'm going to pull in now, and let's look at this first-hand account of the encounter and just give it a once-over so we've kind of got it on the record here on the show, and refresh my mind as I'm launching into a talk with Jim Vieira in the morning. Okay, I've got to one-hand it, guys, because I need to look something up. Actually, I need to type something. So let's go with, because in the written, if I've got it in the written, we can just do that. But I'm pretty sure that's one of the tabs Jacob got. Let's see. So in here, it's going to be, no, that's not correct. But it is 24. Let's see, where are we at here? 10, wow. So that's going to be at least 1,000. Yeah, okay. So the only thing is here, I don't have it all the way, thanks to our friendly neighborhood pup. So I'd much rather find it in there, because that's just not going to work. It might. There's a paragraph. I'm just trying to be conscious of time. Isn't it hard trying to find shit when, like, people are waiting? Especially when a dog is eating half of it indiscriminately. Because, yeah, it's gone to, I'm missing 320. There's 329. Okay. Yeah, but we're missing all the lead up. This stuff's even numbered differently in this edition. So this is, I have a digital edition that Ricardo sent to me, but the numbering is so screwed because they have part 1 and part 2. So let's try 1100 and see if that's anywhere near on the money. Therefore, the numbers are not the same. Still not. Do, 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 do. All right, we're just going to go with this paragraph I have in front of me. And we will not dive as deeply into this text tonight. All right, let me get that out of there, back where I can see you guys. All right, cool. But you need to be able to hear me. So we're at the part of the story where, obviously, here it's labeled concerning the fearless chief Tuscaloosa, who was almost a giant. So even here, they're careful with the word, and how he received the governor. That's Hernando de Soto. The build of Tuscaloosa was like that of his son, for he towered over all the others by more than half a vara. I have been told that a vara is roughly a modern meter. Now I've since learned that, man, when you get into like leagues, right, that shit was changing almost by the decade back then by what they meant by it. So you can't really say for sure, but I've been told we're safe to call it like a meter, right? So half of one of those is 1.5 feet, 2 feet. The build of Tuscaloosa was like that of his son, for he towered over all the others by more than half a vara, and appeared to be a giant, or was one, and the rest of his body and his face were in proportion to his height. His countenance was handsome, and habitually wore a severe expression, that his aspect showed well the ferocity and the nobility of his spirit. His shoulders corresponded to his stature. His waist was a little more than 2 terracias around. His arms and legs were straight. He's trying to emphasize not gigantism. Well set and proportionate to his body. In short, he was the tallest Indian and of the finest figure that these Castilians saw in all of their travels of La Florida. See if we get any more technical description of him. So there is, because this dude does break it down a little further. I think he goes back to it as further. See, this is the part that Jacob got. He goes like back and says further words, on the size of this dude, and he gives further accounts of the other chroniclers who'd backed him up. But there, we at least we see what sort of my interest in this whole giant thing is, right? And what potentially is there. One of the notes or take homes I got from what you got there scribed. Yeah, it is. And when you then couple it, and that's kind of where I was going, thanks there, man, is so one of the take homes I had from watching Dan Richards' video today on giants, what he was focusing on was sort of the museums, and, of course, we all think Smithsonian, and the sort of cases of all the many, many cases, he honed in on a few that definitely seem to indicate there's something to these reports of human skeletons somewhere in the range of 6.5 to 8 feet, sort of on the regular, at least on the regular to what we'd think today. If this was some sort of like anomaly, you'd go, okay, there's a pocket of them in fucking Alabama. That makes sense, right? But you wouldn't kind of like see every time they were digging. Look, hang on. There were pretty regular fucking reports of these very large, human beings and sort of in familial even patterns, right? So giant, yes, I think in the sense that the way they're described, at least in this native context, right, is, and particularly here in Tuscaloosa, and his son are, not only are they sort of 7 to 8 feet, right, but even today, right, at like 6'5", hey, if you see me standing naked, I mean, God bless you, but if you do, whatever you say, it probably won't be he's well proportioned, Don't. There's kids watching. But what I mean by that is like the arms, I mean, they're just long, right? And even the bicep, it's long, right? And the way these cats get described is big. Even the eye, like he breaks down the eyeballs, and he's like, his eyes were the size of oxen, as they're trying to sort of paint the picture of, it's like everything scaled proportionately, right? So, imagine more of like, whatever, a Joe Rogan, but, if he got 8 feet tall and everything went properly in size, you have a much different picture than if I say, oh, a 7.5 foot tall NBA player. You're like, oh, yeah. I guess Shaq, is kind of closer to this point, as you say, of the frame and the body and the musculature and the fat, the flesh, the eye, everything, the gelatin, it all goes with it. It gets bigger. And that's why I think, the word giant is used why it is here, is because there was something different, even if they had seen somebody 7 feet tall before, there was just the fact that it was like properly scaled. And I've already went into that in episode 1, what I then think about the way they described, the way that people looked around here, that potentially you're looking at something genetically. And I think when you couple it with all of these other reports of mound sites around the Americas, and I know I'll learn some more about them, in my discussion tomorrow with Jim Vieira, is a trend, and that's going to be some sort of genetic trend. Are there genetic trends? I mean, a genetic anomaly, okay, but a trend? I think that means you're looking at something much more interesting. And is that trend, an amalgamation of sort of different DNA or slightly different branches of hominids, right? Like, a Denisovan could mate with a human, right? What would you get? I don't know. I guess a slightly taller, more artistic human. I don't know what you'd get. But it's totally... it works genetically, right? So if you're sort of dramatically different at each ends, what then happens is you get a middle road, right? You get these taller people walking around in charge and buried in prominent places in these Native American sites, right? and they don't stand out genetically. There are Native American tales, as Jim Vieira's article, I finished reading it today, as he was talking about, all these Native American tales where there are giants, and by these giants, by this word, you're talking, we mean 11, 12, right? Big. But those always generally have polydactyl traits in them, right? Or red hair. Point being, they look very different from the native population, right? So to have these very tall markers, and these archaeologists that have excavated and noted these same measurements, that these guys noted, right? 7.2 inches was one mentioned in Dan Richards' video earlier, right? You're looking at, and again, they all, when they describe them, they don't describe them as looking differently than their people, other than the size, right? Their people were pretty and handsome, and they were extraordinarily handsome, right? Meaning, in all the proportions. So I'm not sure that there is another way to see it other than something going on genetically, right? And one does wonder if their myths had described much taller people who were differently, meaning polydactyl or multiple rows of teeth or all the things, red hair, right? That if that had meshed at some point in some way genetically with their people, right? Would that not then filter down to 7.5 foot tall leader that for whatever reason tended to be the leaders, at least from the descriptions of these skeletons and the places they were found in mounds, right? And definitively all the descriptions of the encountering with Chief Tuscaloosa. I've got a cedar carving that sort of represents Tuscaloosa, I guess. To me, it's who it represents out here. And that's when the thought about the fire came to me and what all fire meant to these people. And I guess that probably turned into much of the reason for this episode, as much as finishing here with why I have this interest in what we call giants. And tomorrow, I know I'll be able to at least listen to a seasoned researcher in the form of Jim tell me much more about sort of the worldwide and certainly North American trends here. So I'm looking forward to that, and I needed to say hello to you guys. And so that was the main motivation for tonight, because while I've said I'd sit down here 3 times a week, I end up sitting down somewhere pretty much every day, sometimes 2, and it's not always here. So sometimes here, I'm just coming on to sort of say hello and get one in, and hopefully go somewhere enlightening. No fire pun intended. But I think we did. What have you got here for us, Thoth, CIA? Yeah, okay. So you called up, red hair. Or I called up with you. I wasn't looking at the chat. And, we called up. What is this? Oh, yeah. Some of the tallest people I've seen have red hair. Some of the most pronounced jaw lines I've seen are redheads. And on average, it takes a redhead 20% more anesthesia to remain sedated. Well, I don't have the red hair. It's in my family. I kind of got the height. And when the sun gets on it, it's still blonde or brown. But the 20% more anesthesia, that tracks. That tracks in my experience. Probably more like 30 or 40 percent resistant to anesthetic properties, particularly when they came in the form of a alcohol bottle. It's like, does this even work? How much does it take? And laugh now. Thanks for joining us, everybody. I don't want to go on for no reason. And while we could go into all the mounds and everything, guys, if you're interested, one of these days, I'll get all these episodes behind us here at this 33 broken down and whatever, put out more precisely. But if you look back at the titles, you'll see that the things I've touched on, including this mound and this crater and et cetera, all pretty much have a designated episode. Yeah. So if you're interested, all of that footage is pretty much out there and easy to find. I didn't know that either, Amy. Let's click that. Yeah, he reported that to me the other day, and it was totally new fact as well. 6 pints again is, any more, dude. I wouldn't know, but I would imagine I would feel half a pint. If I ever got back to Ireland, I probably would allow myself a pint just because. Straight from the River Liffey there, probably romanticism of it, and that, and it's just tastes different there, and it's good, and But back in the day, yeah, 6 would have been that'd have been while we were figuring out where we were going, man. That'd have been right after lunch. That mark would have been soared past. But yeah, these days I don't think it would be possible for me. Yeah, so I don't really see or feel much more we can go into. I think most of what I was going to harp on came out with the fire, and then of course I wanted to get here on camera and get my head back around sort of my interest in what these first-hand accounts say about the giants here in this area, and they're tied to these mound builders. And then, guys, what role did that? What was that? For our human story. I mean, it's just a question, and I know it's a lot of supposition for a lot of you guys, but whatever. Eventually, we will know what's in this obvious mound modeled on an impact crater. We may never know the full impact of what that meant to this society and this culture. But from all of the artifacts I found and from this earthen project, I think we get a pretty decent idea. Not that they saw it as a star wound necessarily, but they certainly understood that it was a great effect on this land, and that it was a landmark. All right, now I'm making up words for craters. So Ricardo says that he will not join us because Jacqueline is on Occult Rejects. Oh, don't want to compete with old Uncle Nicholas, as he is called over there on Occult Rejects. But that's good to hear. So yeah, I don't have anything more important. I'll be on here all weekend, guys. But what I mainly wanted was to do due diligence, wrap up our topic that we started last week, and then talk about its fulfillment, which will come in a recorded interview tomorrow with an actual expert on all this stuff. So I'm sure that will be very interesting, and many overlaps with my work that I did not foresee coming, as the best always are. All right, nothing thrown in the chat. So I'm going to say goodnight. I'm going to say thank you for listening to me talk about fire. And yeah, I'll wrap back up with that. Go light a fire next time you get a chance. Sit by it and just see what crops up for you, and play that thought experiment out afterwards of what then happens for 300,000 years of humans doing that just because that's what they had to. That was a course of life. And what sort of creature that would produce versus always being huddled around these screens, which if you're huddled around the screen now, I'm grateful, but you know what I'm saying. It makes a very, very different human being. So doesn't that make fire rather important to us and rather important to life on Earth? I think so. All right, everybody. I'll see you two places tomorrow. Well, one of them's recorded, so you won't see it for a few days. But I'll see you tomorrow night on the Roundtable Chronicles. At any point, if anything strikes, you're likely to see me here tomorrow or Sunday. And then I'm sure Sunday or Monday, I'll be back reading Ricardo's book, Stardust, and we will finish with determinism versus free will and the discussions that enables, which we enjoy, and we hope you all do. That Thoth experiment, Thoth experiment, Toth. Yeah, I think so. Sometimes, 30 minutes are worth a thought experiment, man, because I mean, if we're looking at anything I get out of this process, right? It concretizes certain thoughts. Once something is set down on a screen, and out there now on all these various platforms, it does something. It's sort of like writing it down, I think, in a way, and it sort of concretizes much of my thought process. And that's sort of also one of the main important through lines of this show versus the other platforms I do, is it is sort of an inaction kind of look often at my thought process and just the process of discovery and discovering more as we go. And I thank you all. I do love you all, and I do hope you have an excellent what day is this? A weekend? An excellent Friday night. Thank you, Thoth, for that. The Pomeranian, it's got papers, dude. I didn't see that in time to make your proper. Does that have to be a thing now? The Lebowski quote every day? That would probably get old. We'd have to mix it with Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas quotes to get it done. Those of us who had been up all night were in no mood for coffee and donuts. We needed strong drink. Good night, guys. Thanks for joining us. And I don't recommend strong drink. It led to a bad place.